Okay, good day, year 12. I won't be optimistic and say morning. Who knows what time you're viewing this at, but it's just lovely to have you here. And hopefully, we will be meeting together sooner rather than later, if current guidance is accurate. Okay, so what we're going to do then, just to bring that kind of like little round of remote learning around and revision around social diversity to an end, is we are going to complete an exam task. Okay, so that's going to enable us to revise the procedural practice of taking what we know into an exam-based task. Now, the truth is that for me, out of the three tasks, the one we're going to look at today has the greatest value. Literally, it's worth 40 marks. It has the greatest value in that it enables you to revise in one go the greatest amount of skills. Okay, so we're going to be looking today at an exam-based question and how we can go about planning some of that response together, and then how you can take over and complete it. So make sure before we start today that you have access to your notes from last week, because we are going to be using them. It is going to make that process quicker, that you're going to be able to quickly refer back to the articles that we were looking at last week. And we are going to be submitting this work. So which task? Well, I already gave us a clue that we're going to be looking at the highest value task. So just if you look at this structure of paper 2 that we have seen before, it's a quick reminder that we have section A, 30 marks. Section B is divided into 2 tasks. Question 3 is 40 marks and question 4 is 30. So we're going to be looking at question 3 today. Now, that probably as well would have been given away by the fact that we were looking at 2 texts last week. And section B, question 3, will always ask you to do this task, to analyze how language is used in 2 texts, in a text A and a text B, to present something. Often this is going to be linked to a writer's or to writers' attitudes and views towards a particular topic. So we will see the complete question in a minute, but this is just to remind you of how the paper is set up. So we could have done an evaluative question. We could have done a section A, evaluate the idea that social language determines the way a person uses language, evaluate the idea that there are negative attitudes towards accents. You know, we could have done the 30-mark section A question. We could have done the section B question 4, which is also worth 30 marks, to write an opinion article. Any of these questions we've been set up in effect to answer based on the revision of social theorists from the first week of learning or the first session of learning, and this current session of learning where we've looked at 2 articles. But we're going to zoom in on this question 3 because it's got a lot of value in it. We're going to be revising AO1, or sorry, it enabled us to revise AO1 labeling. It's got that AO3 core skill of being able to interpret, analyze meaning, to look at context and language and how they work together to create meaning, to create representation. It also has this AO4 extra component, which is the ability to compare and link. Now, this does cross over into paper 1 that you do with Miss Lockett. There is aspects of comparison across her paper. There's aspects of language labeling and responding to text you've not seen before. So for me, this just seemed the natural task to work towards at this stage, as a way to revise section social diversity. Okay, my darlings, so that's what we're going to be looking at today. So again, just a quick reminder, we're going to be doing some guided reading and, some guided writing, but we do need our notes from last week. So hopefully you've done that work. If you haven't done that work, you need to pause the video now. You need to just own it, go back and do the work from last week, because you can't do the task today if you haven't looked at those articles. Okay, my lovelies? Okay, so this lesson is all about guided writing. We're looking at section B, question 3, and we're going to complete a guided written response. We're going to be using the 2 articles from the guided reading session, and this is an analytical task. So we're going to be looking at the skills of analysis, and we will complete some paragraphs together, but you will finish and submit a complete response. Okay, so you will email me, add to show my homework your response that you achieve, okay? Because I want to see this and I'll mark it and give you feedback. So we are looking at that skill set today. Now, this is our task. So in a minute, you will need to pause and write this task down so that you have a copy of it. You can use it as your title today in front of you. So our task is to analyze how language is used in text A and B to present views about attitudes towards the way people speak. In your answer, you should Examine any similarities and differences you find between the two texts, and explore how effectively the texts present their views. And this is worth 40 marks. Now, quickly, the bit I've highlighted in yellow, that's the bit that will change with each exam series. Okay, every time a new exam's put out, that yellow phrase will change. But the rest of the structure of the question will remain the same. This will always be how the question is presented. Analyze how language is used in text A and B to present, which will change each time. They will also always say that you should do these two things. Examine any similarities and differences. So that's that AO4 objective, the ability to compare, and explore how effectively the text present their views. Now, that's an indication that they're looking for you for the highest possible marks to be evaluative, okay, to look at the text and decide which is working well, which is effective, which is achieving its outcome. Now, again, text A and B for us was pre-decided. We've looked at text A and B last week. So our text A is the first text from the BBC Work Life webpage, and our text B is Shut Your Face. So that's what we're going to be looking at. So just pause the screen and write down your title. We're going to be using that for our work today. Okay, so really this is a question about how a writer presents their perspective, how a writer can convey a point of view, an opinion, a feeling and a thought through their language choices. Now, the only reason I'm just pausing and providing this screen really is, although it takes away from the actual way the task is set out in the exam, this also reminds us of what Miss Lockett's inviting you to do for your coursework, okay? To gather data and think about how it's presenting a perspective, a point of view, an appealing, an opinion, thoughts and feelings towards topics as well. So it might be that if you're looking at your coursework choices, this is a way that you could introduce a question, a coursework question, that would lead to the kind of analysis that we're going to do today. But fundamentally then, all writers will have a point of view, an opinion, a feeling and a thought about a topic. Okay, now our topic is about accents and whether or not people should adapt the way they speak, whether or not their language should be affected or influenced by social factors, by the way that society views them or perceives them. So our writers are going to have an opinion about that. They're going to have a point of view. They're going to feel something. Shut Your Face, she definitely feels something. So our focus here is to break those feelings down and to look at how the language achieves that. Now, I've put positive, negative, and ambivalent in red because although these are good ways to think, these are not good ways to write. Now, what I mean by that is anytime you read an article, anytime you're approaching a text, you can be thinking, right, is the writer's point of view, their opinion, their feelings positive, negative, or ambivalent? It is a good way in. But if you only ever write at this level, if you only ever use these words, the writer feels positively, the writer feels negatively, the writer is ambivalent, you end up being very repetitive and you end up getting stuck. So although we like the lens that this gives us, that when we look at a text, we look through the lens of, is the writer positive, negative, or ambivalent about something? When we start to turn that into analysis, we want to expand our banks of vocabulary. So I don't just want to say this writer is really positive about X, Y, or Z. I want to decide whether they're celebratory, whether they're praising, endorsing, commending, advocating. So there's lots of vocabulary that we can use under this umbrella term of positive. Similarly, under the umbrella of negative, we can think about, well, is this writer offering a criticism of something? Are they critical? Is there a sense of condemnation and ridicule towards a particular topic? And when we think about this idea of being ambivalent, we have to recognize that some writers will withhold their personal feeling and thoughts. They will remain detached, undecided, objective, but they might present us with different points of view. Okay, so it also then guides us to the language. Well, what lexical choices are they making that shows they're being positive, negative, or ambivalent? Are there words of praise? Are there words of ridicule? Are they making lexical choices that show that they're detached? Are they using similes, metaphors? And are those metaphors in turn then reinforcing a sense of criticism? Or are they metaphors that create a tone of praise? Are they language choices, figurative language choices that show that our writer is undecided. Now, we know from the work we've done last week that already we've landed on some of these lexical choices our writers have made. We've identified some of their metaphors. So really the skill of this lesson this week isn't about identifying, but turning our notes into our written responses. Okay, so what's the authorial perspective and voice? Now, what we have to recognize is that we have authors, okay? They have their own voice, their own points of view, opinions, feelings. But sometimes the authorial perspective and voice will be set against or alongside the points of view of other people, other perspectives. So it's really important when we're analyzing that we appreciate the context that our quotes are coming from. And you'll see that term again in a minute. We need to appreciate the context. Is this word or phrase actually something that offers an authorial perspective that the author has chosen to use to show what they feel? Or actually, is it a word or phrase that's showing somebody else's point of view? And that's really important. And that can be a really key indicator to the examiner of how well you've read and understood your text. If you pick out a word or phrase, but actually it's from another source, it's not the writer's opinion, that can go against you. So we'll remind ourselves of the importance of context in a minute. And finally, we always need to think about how the writer is working in conjunction with the readership, okay? Because your writer will be positioning the reader. Now, these are 3 words. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to pause and make notes on these, okay? But these 3 words are really key. Now, a writer can polarize their reader. In other words, they can separate themselves from their readership. They can risk alienating their reader. They don't really care what their reader thinks. They use a very I versus them approach. So I think this, but those people, if you think something differently, I don't mind being polarized, separated from your opinion. So writers sometimes will polarize themselves by being risky or confrontational or aggressive in tone. Sometimes their voice and perspective, that they're so confident in what they think or feel about a subject that they don't really care if they alienate their readership, if they polarize opinion. In other words, some people will agree with me, some people won't. It's kind of like the Marmite moment. You're either going to love it or hate it. You're either going to agree with me or disagree with me. I love Katie Edwards. I love her slightly aggressive, comical tone, but some people might really hate that. They might find her too aggressive, too in their face. So we can polarize our readership. We can universalize, okay? So sometimes we'll see writers universalizing. In other words, assuming that everybody is the same. When we universalize, we assume that our reader shares our opinion. We're all of a universal opinion. We're all in agreement. Okay, so that might be using phrases like us, we, that way in which a reader and a writer align themselves together. The assumption that a writer makes that you're going to agree with me. And dramatization is the way in which an authorial perspective and voice might dramatize their opinion. In other words, they're going to peg it to a real world context. So in a minute, you can just rewind a little bit if it helps. But these are 3 really key terms, particularly if we're aiming for that A grade: to polarize, to separate opinion, not to be afraid to take risks. I don't mind putting me over on this side of the fence, literally with my idea, and you on that side. So they're not afraid at taking risks with their ideas. Now, that can be both positive and negative. Universalizing, as the writer, I'm just going to assume everyone agrees with me. I'm going to universalize. I'm going to assume we're all of the shared opinion. And dramatization, I'm going to use pegs, anecdotes, storytelling to make my opinion stick. So just pause and make a note of that. Okay, guys, now we are also then going to introduce a very simple plan. Okay, now there are more elaborate plans. Some people love elaborate plans. Coursework planning should be elaborate. Okay, you're planning your coursework. You should be making elaborate plans, really detailed plans that you refer back to, that you refine. You spend time planning for your coursework in advance. But actually, in an exam, we need a simple plan structure, guys. We need to make some quick, simple notes, a planning structure that we can apply very quickly when time is against us. So this is our simple plan that I want you to write down. Okay, we're going to write about the graphological features, the opening sentence and the section. We're going to look for the presentations of views, 1 to 3 of those from both texts. We're going to analyse the closing sentence and section, and we're going to offer a summative or evaluative conclusion. Now, each of these areas I am going to expand upon as we work through the next section of the lesson, but that's our simple plan, guys. So I just want you to write down those 5